So this is going to be part one of a two-part series about the development of core barrels. Now, for those that don't know, the core barrel is the tool used to both cut and then retain the core sample. And in its simplest form consists of an outer tube, which has the thread for the drill rod up on this end, a reaming shell, a diamond bit, and then inside the diamond bit is a core spring or a lifter, which retains the core. And the basic requirements are it has to be strong enough that you could push it in the rock underneath substantial weight and rotate it. And it has to be hollow, so that way you could get water or mud or air through to remove the cutting from the bit. Here we have two different styles of bits. We have, right here is the WG series of bits, and here is the WM series, and these are both B-size bits. Also, this is a surface set bit, and this is an impregnated bit. So, in another video, I'm going to go over types of bits, differences in development as well. So, at first, the simplest type of core barrel is the single tube core barrel, which, because it's the simplest, it, historically speaking, was always the most inexpensive and the most rugged. Because all you have is your barrel head with your threads to your rod, your outer tube, your reaming shell with your lifter inside the bit, and then your bit down here. And here I have a bit here. So here's the bit, here's the lifter, tapered on the inside to fit right in. And the advantage of this style is it is very hard to get a core blockage. The only time where you really have a core blockage is when it's completely full. So because of that, you get a higher rate of penetration, but the downside is it would expose the core to both fluid and mechanical erosion, because your water or mud has to flow around the core before it leaves the bit, so the entire core is exposed to washing action, which could wash away anything that's potentially sensitive to water. And because the whole assembly is rotating at potentially up to 1,000 RPM, that core is going to be being knocked around inside that tube, which is going to do some mechanical erosion too. So between the two types of erosion, you can only really use this core barrel for the most solid and competent types of rock. And because it is a conventional core barrel, to remove the core, you have to pull your bit and reaming shell off and pull the core out from the tube. So the next step in development was the double tube rigid type of barrel, which it uses the same bit and lifter assembly as the single tube barrel, and that would actually become a standard with the G series core barrels later on. You would be able to use the same bit for both single and double tube styles. The main difference is there's an inner tube that the core goes up into after it passes the lifter. So what that would do is isolate the core from fluid erosion, because your water would flow between your outer tube and your inner tube. So the only place where water would contact the core would be right at the bit face and the lifter. And this would help prevent water and mud from washing away the sample. But this is the double tube rigid type. And because of that, your inner tube is still rotating with the outer tube. There's still some level of mechanical erosion from that core being knocked about. It is less erosion than there would be with the single tube barrel, because it's tighter, it helps hold the core in straighter, but you could still have that mechanical erosion occur. So that had to be solved next to increase core recovery. So with the issue of the inner tube being rigidly attached to the outer tube and that mechanical erosion that would occur, the next step would be, how do we isolate the inner barrel from rotating with the outer barrel? And it was a fairly simple idea. You put a ball bearing between your inner and outer tube. So your outer tube and your bit, they can rotate, they can cut the core, you're still pumping water along the outside of the inner tube, you're still eliminating that fluid erosion. And with the ball bearing, that inner tube is going to stay relatively stationary over the core just because of the friction of the core dragging on it. So this, again, improved core recovery, and in theory, you have completely eliminated fluid and mechanical erosion. But there was still one major problem, especially in the coal fields of Pennsylvania, that prevented full recovery from occurring. Now, if we remember back to the development of the WG series of core barrels, each one of these designs uses the same bit. You got a bit, it could be impregnated or surface set with your pin thread here. But in each one of these designs, your core lifter sits inside the bit. And because of that, this whole assembly rotates. And on your core lifter, this one's a bit rusty and beat up, but typically there'd be ridges in here, that run horizontally. And these would help, bite the core. There's a taper on the inside of the bit, and when you would lift up on your jewel string, the lifter would get pushed in, that spring would tighten up on the core and retain it. You could see the gap down there. I push it in, that gap gets tighter. I pull it back out, that gap gets more open. You have a better angle here. So this is how your core would be retained, but the lifter was grinding against the core. So you've eliminated your mechanical erosion inside the inner tube itself, but not at the bit. At this time in history, you had a lot of companies that were both diamond drill contractors and manufacturers. Sprague & Henwood was one of them out of northeast Pennsylvania. There was also Borat Longyear. Akro-Drill at the time also had a contract drill division. And Sprague & Henwood came up with a solution that would be adopted as the standard, and that would be the M series of core barrel. It is identical to the double tube swivel type core barrel, except for the inner tube assembly and the bit. So in our standard WG series bit, our lifter goes inside the bit. So Sprague & Henwood extended the bit, and they put an extension on the inner tube that was threaded, and that would have what's called a core lifter case on it. And this would contain the lifter on the inside. So now your core lifter is isolated from rotation, and it's affixed right behind the bit by about probably about 1/8 of an inch typically. So your bit rotates and your core goes through your bit, and then right behind it, of course these would be nested together like this, your core lifter and the lifter case would just follow right along without really rotating. And it would function the same when you go to remove your core. It's got a taper in it, it would bite on it, and then you could remove your core from the hole. Modern day core barrels, they all trace their fundamental design to the M series here. And with the M series, especially for Sprague & Henwood, being located in northeastern Pennsylvania in the anthracite fields and doing contract drilling all across the entire planet at that point, they could now reliably take samples of specifically for them, anthracite and bituminous coal. And they had two variations, one with a roller bearing, one with a regular ball bearing. And the M series got adopted as a Diamond Core Drill Manufacturers Association standard. Now here we're going to skip a little bit ahead to, I guess you could say, after part 2. The modern style of conventional core barrels, the fundamental design goes back to the M series, but some changes have been made. The V series is compatible with the long ear Q series wireline barrels. The only difference is it's not a wireline barrel, it's a conventional core barrel. And in part 2, that's going to be about the wireline core barrels. The other series that is common is the WD series, if I'm not mistaken. And that essentially is a conventional barrel. The core sizes are the same as the V and the Q series, but it's a much heavier outer tube and bit, specifically for the constant disassembly and reassembly associated with conventional drilling. So to briefly recap each core barrel design discussed, you have to remove your entire drill string to remove your sample from your core barrel. And you have to do that whether your hole is only going to, say, 50 or 60 feet, or 5,000 or 6,000 feet. So part 2 of this is going to cover the development of wireline systems and at least all that I know of, the different designs that came to the market and which one eventually won out, the runner-up, and which one was made obsolete. So that's going to be part 2. I'm not sure how soon I'll get to it, but there will be part 2. And then later at some point, I'm going to cover the development of diamond bits and the evolution of them. So keep an eye out from that. I appreciate your time. If you have any input to add yourselves, feel free to comment below. Appreciate it. Have a good day.